What if the most important stories in your life weren't written by you, but by ancient, universal blueprints shared by every human who has ever lived? Imagine finding out that the dreams you dismiss, the sudden urges you can't explain, and the profound attractions you feel aren't random at all, but coded messages from a vast, shared psychic ocean, a realm far deeper and more influential than your personal feelings. We're not talking about the simple, personal unconscious that holds your forgotten memories. We are diving into the breathtaking world of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, where the mind is a universe, and the ultimate goal is not just therapy, but self-realization, individuation. Jung taught that your mind is layered, and beneath your personal basement of forgotten thoughts lies the collective unconscious, a psychic inheritance teeming with primal energies, universal symbols, and archetypal figures that dictate the drama of your life. This journey is about confronting the hidden forces that make you restless, searching for the meaning in your chaos, and finally, uniting the conscious self you show the world with the hidden self you keep guarded. For those tired of surface-level psychology and ready to understand the true mythic depth of their identity, this is the script for you. Stay with me, because the first key we unlock is the structure of the psyche, the layers that explain why you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself. Jung's map of the psyche is fundamentally different from his predecessors, particularly Freud, because it is not just historical, it is teleological, meaning it aims towards a future purpose, wholeness. To understand your mind in Jungian terms is to understand three interconnected layers, the first being the ego. The ego is the center of the field of consciousness. It's the part of you that says, I. It is responsible for continuity and identity. The ego is what you perceive as yourself, your name, your job title, your beliefs, and your social persona. Crucially, the ego acts as a gatekeeper, filtering information from the inner world and the outer world, providing the coherence necessary for daily life. However, Jung warned that an overinflated or isolated ego can cut a person off from the deeper resources of the mind, leading to a sterile, one-sided existence. The ego is necessary, but it is not the totality of the self. Immediately below the ego lies the personal unconscious. This is the area most similar to what other psychologists might call the subconscious. The personal unconscious is composed of all the memories, urges, feelings, and experiences that were once conscious but have been repressed, forgotten, or simply ignored because they were deemed unimportant or incompatible with the ego's self-image. For instance, a childhood fear, a silly mistake you buried, or an emotion that was too painful to process. These reside here. This is the origin of what Jung called complexes. A complex is an emotionally charged group of ideas or images that revolve around a central core, such as the mother complex or the power complex. These complexes act like small, autonomous subpersonalities within the psyche. When someone has a complex, it means they are momentarily possessed or hijacked by this independent energy. For example, a man with a strong inferiority complex might, when challenged, react with disproportionate anger because the complex has been activated, overriding the conscious ego's control. Identifying and integrating these complexes is one of the ego's first therapeutic tasks. But the most revolutionary and impactful layer of Jung's model is the collective unconscious. This is not acquired individually, it is inherited. Jung discovered that his patients, across different cultures and backgrounds, shared remarkably similar mythological motifs, symbols, and dreams that could not be explained by their personal experiences alone. He theorized that humanity shares a common psychic heritage, a repository of latent memory traces from our evolutionary and historical past. Think of it as the spiritual DNA of humanity. The collective unconscious is universal, timeless, and completely impersonal. It is the source of all the great myths, religions, and fairy tales found globally. This layer does not contain specific facts, but rather potential forms or patterns of behavior and perception. These potential forms are what Jung named the archetypes. Archetypes are universal, archaic patterns and images that derive from the collective unconscious and are the basic units of the human psyche. They are psychic instincts that predispose us to perceive and react to the world in specific ways. For example, we don't learn the concept of motherhood. We are born with an archetype of the mother that predisposes us to expect certain attributes, nurturance, protection, from a mother figure. Other major archetypes include the hero, the shadow, the anima, animus, and the wise old man. These powerful psychic structures shape our perception, motivate our actions, and appear most clearly in our dreams, visions, and moments of intense emotional charge. Understanding that your behavior is often being guided by these deep, collective patterns is the first step towards self-mastery. If the ultimate aim of the Jungian journey is to achieve wholeness or individuation, the very first and often most painful step is confronting the shadow. You cannot integrate what you refuse to acknowledge. The shadow is arguably the most significant archetype in the personal unconscious. It represents the neglected, suppressed, and disowned aspects of your personality, everything that your conscious ego finds unacceptable. This includes your weaknesses, your base instincts, your aggressive urges, your selfish desires, and even your irrational fears. But, and this is crucial, the shadow also contains positive, unused qualities that you rejected, because they didn't fit the role or persona you adopted to please others. Maybe you suppressed your natural creativity because your family valued logic, or your passion for leadership because you were told to be quiet. The shadow operates entirely unconsciously, and its energy doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. Instead, it builds pressure, much like a gas trapped in a container. When this pressure becomes too great, the shadow bursts into consciousness, leading to moments we call losing control. This could manifest as disproportionate anger over a trivial matter, a sudden urge for self-sabotage right before a success, or compulsive behaviors you deeply regret. These moments are the unconscious forcing its way into your conscious life. Projection. Seeing your shadow in others. How do you know what your shadow looks like? The most common mechanism the mind uses to deal with the shadow is projection. Since the ego cannot tolerate its own dark aspects, it conveniently projects them onto other people, groups, or concepts. When you despise a trait in another person, say, their arrogance, their laziness, or their self-centeredness, it is highly probable that you are actually looking at a repressed part of your own shadow. That intense negative reaction is a powerful clue. For instance, the person who constantly criticizes others for being judgmental is likely projecting their own suppressed critical nature. The colleague who finds every boss to be power-hungry is projecting their own disowned desire for control. Projection allows us to feel morally superior, but it prevents any real self-knowledge. This is why Jung famously said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." To truly begin shadow work, you must start asking, what part of me is mirrored in the person I dislike the most? The danger of the unintegrated shadow. When the shadow remains unconscious and unintegrated, it holds an enormous amount of energy that could otherwise be fueling your creativity and authenticity. An unintegrated shadow often leads to a stagnant life and a feeling of alienation. The person becomes one-sided, perhaps hyperlogical and emotionally stunted, because they have rejected the feeling aspect of their shadow. Or they might be overly agreeable and passive, having rejected the assertive, aggressive power that lies within the shadow. Furthermore, a powerful unintegrated shadow is the source of much conflict in the world. Jung believed that the massive collective evils committed by humanity often result from the mass projection of individual shadows onto external enemies, be they political groups, nationalities, or religious creeds. The work of integrating the shadow is not just personal, it is a profound moral and social duty. The path of integration. Integrating the shadow does not mean becoming a worse person, it means becoming a whole person. It is not about acting out your darker impulses, but about acknowledging and harnessing the energy they contain. This process requires great humility and courage. The first step is owning the projections. When you find yourself highly reactive, stop and force yourself to withdraw the projection. This anger I feel toward their arrogance belongs, in part, to my own suppressed desire to be noticed. The second step is dialogue. Since the shadow often speaks through dreams, active imagination, and fantasies, you can engage with these figures. What does your dark side want? Usually, it's not destruction, but recognition, expression, or use. By integrating the shadow, you don't extinguish your dark side. You transform its brute, chaotic power into conscious vitality. You stop wasting energy on suppression and start using that energy for creative, ethical action. You gain access to your full emotional range and can respond to life with genuine depth, rather than through a controlled, narrow persona. This difficult, lifelong journey of confronting what is easiest to hide is the bedrock upon which genuine psychological maturity is built. As you move deeper into the Jungian psyche, beyond the personal complexes and the immediate darkness of the shadow, you encounter the contrasexual archetypes, the anima in men and the animus in women. These are arguably the most challenging and yet most rewarding archetypes to integrate because they directly influence our relationships, creativity, and inner sense of balance. They represent the feminine principle in the male unconscious and the masculine principle in the female unconscious, respectively. Jung believed that every human being possesses the psychological traits of both genders. For centuries, cultural and societal pressures force individuals to emphasize the traits associated with their biological sex while suppressing the opposite. This suppressed opposite-sex energy does not vanish. It gathers in the unconscious, forming the anima or animus. These archetypes act as a vital bridge between the ego and the deep well of the collective unconscious. They are literally the internal images of what the other sex means to us, built from personal experience, cultural programming, and primal inherited patterns. The anima, the soul image in men. In men, the anima is the embodiment of the feminine principle, relatedness, feeling, emotionality, intuition, and receptivity. Because societal roles often pressure men to be logical, stoic, and aggressive, these soft emotional qualities are often repressed. When a man's anima is unconscious, he may struggle deeply in relationships, projecting his unacknowledged feminine ideal onto real women. He might fall head over heels for a woman who embodies his anima ideal, only to become bitterly disappointed when she reveals her genuine, flawed, human reality. A man whose anima is poorly integrated might display exaggerated moodiness, sudden bouts of irrational jealousy, or become overly passive, prone to complaining and emotional paralysis, trapped by feelings he cannot articulate or manage. The goal of integrating the anima is for the man to establish a direct connection with his own feelings and intuition. When the anima is conscious, she provides the man with emotional depth, sensitivity, relational competence, and access to his inner world of creativity and soul. She helps him communicate truthfully from the heart, rather than just the head. The animus, the spirit image in women. Conversely, in women, the animus embodies the masculine principle: logic, aggression, objective thought, assertive action, and the power of analysis. Historically, women were often restricted from exercising these qualities publicly, leading to the repression of the animistic energy. When a woman's animus is unconscious, she, too, projects this ideal onto men, seeking a powerful, knowledgeable partner to compensate for her own unacknowledged strength. An unintegrated animus often manifests as rigid, critical, and dogmatic opinions. Jung described this as the tyranny of the word, where the woman substitutes thoughtful dialogue with forceful, unchallenged truth or reasoning. She might struggle with deep self-doubt, leading to an overly defensive or critical stance toward others, particularly other women. When the animus is integrated, it provides the woman with inner strength, self-assertion, critical thinking skills, and a capacity for objective action and purpose in the world. It transforms her inner reasoning from being defensive and dogmatic into being clear, constructive, and effective. The key to mature relationships. Jung emphasized that integrating the anima and animus is not just about personal balance, it is the key to maturity in relationships. When you are unaware of your inner opposite-sex image, you use external partners as a hook upon which to hang your unfulfilled inner needs. You don't see the person, you see your projection. This is the source of endless disappointment and conflict. The work requires recognizing that the traits you find most attractive and most maddening in your partner often mirror the qualities of your own inner anima or animus. The goal is to withdraw the projection and develop those qualities internally. A man learns to feel and relate without needing a woman to process his emotions. A woman learns to assert and think objectively without needing a man to validate her judgment. By consciously engaging with these archetypes, men and women move closer to psychic completeness. They stop being driven by unconscious romantic fantasies or gender stereotypes, and instead become individuals who are psychologically balanced, capable of both deep feeling and clear thought. This inner marriage of the masculine and feminine paves the way for the highest stage of development, individuation. If you have successfully confronted your shadow and begun the challenging work of integrating your inner masculine, animus, and feminine, anima, you are now walking the unique path that Carl Jung called individuation. This is not a state of being perfect, nor is it about becoming like everyone else. It is the lifelong, arduous psychological process of becoming a unified, distinct, and whole individual, a person who is psychologically and spiritually aware of themselves and their place in the world. The driving force behind individuation is the ultimate archetype, the self. The self, the archetype of wholeness. The self is the central organizing archetype of the entire psyche, encompassing both the conscious and the unconscious. While the ego is the center of consciousness, the I, the self is the center of the total personality. It is the archetype of meaning, unity, and transcendence. It represents the innate human potential for wholeness, constantly pushing the individual toward integration. The self expresses itself in symbols that represent unity and totality. Across cultures, these symbols are often the mandala, a circular geometric design representing the cosmos and the totality of the person, the great circle, or the stone. When the self is activated, often through profound life crises, dreams, or intense therapy, it begins to reorganize the contents of the psyche. The experience of the self is often overwhelming, spiritual, and deeply stabilizing, providing a sense of meaning that transcends everyday life. The process of individuation is essentially the process of bringing the ego into a proper relationship with the self. Early in life, the ego believes it is the sole master. As we mature psychologically, we realize the ego is merely the executive branch, serving the higher wisdom of the self. This transition is marked by a profound change in attitude, moving from what do I want, ego, to what am I meant to be, self. The stages of individuation. Individuation is not a linear path, but a spiraling, ongoing dialogue between the conscious and unconscious, often marked by two key phases, encountering the persona and the shadow. This initial phase involves peeling away the persona, the mask we wear in public to fulfill social roles, and confronting the shadow. This leads to honesty about one's true motives and a realization that the conscious identity is far narrower than the total personality. If you skip this step, you remain shallow, either trapped by social expectation, persona, or controlled by repressed impulses, shadow. Integrating the anima, animus, and the collective unconscious. This deeper phase involves integrating the inner opposite-sex images, leading to better internal balance and healthier external relationships. As the individual withdraws projections from external partners, they access the wisdom and energy of the collective unconscious, tapping into universal themes and deeper psychic resources. This stage is crucial for developing genuine wisdom and creativity. Synchronicity, the language of the self. As the ego aligns with the self, the individual often experiences phenomena that Jung termed synchronicity. Synchronicity is defined as the meaningful coincidence of an outer event and an inner psychological state, where there is no apparent causal link between the two. For example, thinking intensely about an old friend you haven't seen in years, only to have them call you moments later. Jung argued that these events are not random luck. They are evidence of an underlying unus mundus, one world, where matter and psyche are interconnected. Synchronistic events are often the self's way of communicating with the ego, confirming that the individual is on the right path or pointing them toward necessary change. A person engaged in individuation becomes increasingly sensitive to these signs, reading the environment not just with logic, but with profound intuition. The fruit of wholeness. The completion of the individual process is not a finish line. It is a profound change in how one lives. An individuated person is not flawless, but they possess a deep inner authority and self-acceptance. They are no longer dependent on external validation. Their reactions are less neurotic, and they can tolerate the ambiguity and suffering inherent in life without losing their core sense of meaning. Ultimately, the psychology of the subconscious mind, as mapped by Carl Jung, is a heroic call to action, to descend into the depths of your own soul. Reclaim the gold stolen by the shadow and the complexes, and forge a life that is truly, authentically, and uniquely yours. You now have the 4 keys to the Jungian psyche: the structure of the mind, the confrontation with the shadow, the integration of the anima animus, and the achievement of the self through individuation. If this deep dive into your unconscious mind has opened your eyes to new possibilities, don't keep this journey to yourself. Please take a moment to like this script, share it with someone who is searching for meaning, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights into the hidden forces that shape our lives. Thank you for taking this journey toward wholeness.